This is video 2 of I Need Answers, where we're looking at 6 different questions that you have put in. And today's question is, does God really care about what I put in my body? We're gonna talk about things like food that we eat, drugs, vapes, cigarettes, even more things about purity. But does God really care about what we do with our body? Our hope is that we answer your question with biblical reflections.
So does God care what we put in our body is a question that we've been asked. And I think what a better question to then ask is, does God care about our physical bodies as well as our souls, the embodiment of our souls here on earth? Does God care about that? And I think short answer is yes. We are a created being and God cares about his creation. And so when we look at our physical body, Psalms tells us that we are knit together in our mother's womb. Our physical body is formed by him. And so therefore he cares about our body. And so to that, does he care what we put in our body? Yes, he cares about our physical body. So therefore he cares about what basically fuels our body. And I think we hear in 1 Corinthians as well that our bodies are a temple of the Holy Spirit. And we see in the Old Testament the Israelites caring for the temple because it's God's dwelling place. And so then as New Testament, post-New Testament people, we are the Holy Spirit, we are the temple of the Holy Spirit within our bodies. And so if the Israelites cared for the physical temple as a dwelling place, then we are to therefore care for the physical temple of the dwelling place as our bodies. And in addition to that, 2 Corinthians talks about doing everything as if doing it for the Lord. And so what we eat, what we drink, how we speak, everything, including food and exercise, is meant to be for the Lord and for his glory ultimately. And so when it comes to that, I think you get two opposite ends of the spectrum. You get this idea of we're meant to live in abundance and enjoy food, drink, and be joyful. But we are also supposed to have self-control. When we look at Galatians and it talks about the fruits of the Spirit, we're to be self-controlled and disciplined about not only our physical body, but our spiritual self as well. And if we can't be self-controlled in what we eat and what we drink, how are we going to be self-controlled in the more vague mind aspects of those things? And I think when we get to two extremes in that way of, I want to enjoy my life and I want to enjoy the good food that the good exercise, the fun things that God's put on earth.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
And
there's a big foodie.
Yeah. But then to that end, like what level is like, do we take that too far? Of like, I indulge way too much because I want to enjoy God's best. And then on the other end of like, I need to be so self-controlled and so disciplined that I make my body an idol, or I make food an idol, or exercise an idol. And I think that's where the heart check comes in of, okay, am I doing this to make my body look a certain way, to make culture view my body a certain way, or am I doing it ultimately for the Lord? And I think exercise and fitness and all of those things are care for our body, but where our heart is in that is, I think, a reflection of who we are in our sin nature. But what do you guys think when you hear like, God cares what I put in my body? Like, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? I know you said good food, like good food comes to mind. How do we practice self-control and not allow it to go to the extreme of disordered eating and things like that?
Yeah, there's so many like rabbit trails we can go down. Like vaping, is it like, you know, my body's I'm gonna get a new body one day in heaven. Like drugs, alcohol, overeating, eating ingesting Red 40, like all these different things. There's a lot of health things out there that we've learned that aren't even good. And so, you know, it's funny when someone's like, I'm gonna go on this diet, or I'm gonna live this CrossFit life, and they're almost overly zealous for training and what they put in their body. And it's like, that's your God now. And so there's definitely a fine line that we want to walk with, like, okay, if the body is a temple, and you mentioned this, and I love that you mentioned this, the Old Testament has chapters and chapters and chapters where Moses writes the instructions from God in which the temple must be obstructed and taken care of. And there's little details that are so important. Well, now that the Holy Spirit dwells within us, the veil was torn. Holy Spirit, God dwells He's
within you.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And don't quench the Spirit, number one. And, you know, there's a lot to that. But,
Yeah.
but man, if there's so much detail there,
Right.
then
And now our bodies are the
what,
temple.
yeah, what we consume, not even just
Not even
bring
food.
in,
Yeah.
but what we consume with our eyes and our ears. It's like the song, "Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see,"
Yeah.
and all the things. Like
Yeah.
that's a real thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we need to be watchful always. I will say, and maybe you can answer this, but maybe kind of a different dynamic where Jesus even says, "It's not what goes into you that defiles you; it's what
Right.
comes out."
It's what comes out. Right.
So you could use that passage
Sure.
and say, "Oh well."
I can eat whatever. Whatever. It doesn't matter. Yeah.
But let's look at the
Well,
context. of it.
I think of another thing that Jesus says when he's talking about rendering unto Caesar what is Caesar's and rendering unto God. Like the fact that we
Yeah.
are made in God's image, I think, should be a great motivator to consider taking care of ourselves. Because of the aspect that our bodies are not our own, right? We are made in God's image, but we are, and I think it brings up the aspect of stewardship, which stewardship is just taking care of something that's been given to you.
Yeah.
As a believer, your body has been given to you by God, and it's been made in His image. So I'm going to treat it like I'm treating a special thing that someone's given me that's not my own. And so that's why I'm taking care of my body. And I think erring just on the side of not necessarily caution, but wisdom in that of like, if you feel like you can't eat certain foods because that's not you taking care of your body, then great, then don't eat those foods. But that doesn't mean that we have to, make the same regimen for everyone.
Right.
Convictions are
Yeah.
convictions for a reason.
Exactly, and I think there's ways to have conversations with people that are
absolutely.
that bring up those things.
Yeah.
But I also, the other place that my mind goes to is, what's the purpose of you taking care of your body? And you kind of hit on this, like, are you working out? Are you eating certain foods so that you appear more spiritual, that you
Right.
appear better than other people?
Right.
Or are you doing it as an act of worship? And I think Jesus hits on this in Matthew 6 when he's talking about like, what's the purpose of fasting? Like, why are you doing it? Is it so
Right.
that everyone sees how spiritually
doing it.
disciplined you are?
Yeah.
Or is it because you want to honor your Father in heaven? And so the same question can be asked. Are you eating good food because you really want to honor and steward the body that God's given you?
Yeah.
Or are you eating good food so that everyone else sees how good looking you are? Like,
Good-looking you
what's
are,
the point
right.
of that? Where's the worship going? Is it
Yeah.
to you and to other people, or is it to God?
Yeah.
What an incredible Jewish conversation to have too, because
Yes.
think about the amount of learned habits that young Jewish men and women were following, and they were not going to eat these foods because that's how they did it. That's what their dad did. That's what their forefathers did. I'm going to do it as Jacob did it. I'm going to do it, all these different things. And at the end of the day, when Jesus comes on the scene and he's like, I come to fulfill the law, that was a tough thing for them
Yeah.
to be like, okay, I can do this
have to
now,
throw
because
everything else out?
there wasn't just this like learned habit, but it was like, I'm righteous because of these things.
The adherence to that.
And Jesus is like, actually, you're not. You
Yeah.
just were set apart because in the Old Testament, I wanted you to be different from the nations. And in the Old Testament, when you're in the wilderness, I was protecting you from diseases. Like,
Yeah.
that's why you couldn't eat
Yeah.
these things.
And I think like even the fact that God gives them, like He gives them parameters for what they are to eat and not to eat is more evidence of the fact that God cares about their physical body.
Yeah.
But then later, Jesus abolished that. Like we are now allowed to be free to eat whatever we want, but that doesn't mean that we then go on to the other extreme, just eating everything we
But
can.
are we
But are we
glorifying,
glorifying the Lord?
Him in our bodies and our souls?
Yeah.
And we could also have the conversation about purity. in
Yeah,
this. Is
absolutely.
like,
Yeah.
I've messed up once,
Yeah.
so what? I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
I'm broken now,
Yeah.
and that's what's so beautiful about the redemption of God is that, regardless of what you've ingested or what you've done to your body, you can be redeemed. You
Yeah.
can be bought back.
Yeah. And He's redeemed us to live holy. And so that means, yes, He does care about what we put in our bodies, but for His glory and for
right.
His worship. So
Yeah.
Great combo.
Great.
Thanks, guys.